So let's start again. Thanks again to ACT Research for having us here. My name is Michael Lucas. I'm the Director of Strategy at Xos Trucks out in LA, and what that means is I'm responsible for our corporate strategy as well as our investor relations. Before we dive in a little bit about myself, I've spent my career both early on as an engineer and then on the business side around heavy machinery, be it in the automotive and trucking world, agriculture, and aerospace. So some of these topics are close to my heart. I used to spend a lot more time in this part of the country, I can tell you that. Quickly, before we proceed, Xos is another one of the public companies here. So we'll be making statements and you'll be seeing things that do constitute forward-looking statements. This is not investment advice. These things can and will change. But obviously trying to bring the best perspective from our unique niche in the market, as it were, to all of you. So this is our main product, our focus, our medium-duty step van, which we'll be talking a bunch about. And I want to briefly introduce Xos to all of you all, but then spend some time really thinking and talking about the markets that we operate in and why last mile, regional, these shorter predictable routes are and can continue to be at the forefront of EV adoption for a lot of the reasons that prior presenters have mentioned around the range and charging infrastructure needs. So Xos, briefly, we started in 2016, founded by a pair of fleet operators out in LA who frankly were seeing the way the California market was going, getting tired of dealing with the challenges of keeping a diesel fleet up and running, a small fleet up and running with increasingly complex emissions regulations and just the natural wear and tear that these vehicles undergo. So where we started was building a prototype, taking it around the country. It was originally a Class 8, and talking to fleet operators to understand what mattered to them. And I'm sure it will come as no surprise that those things are durability and total cost of ownership. Obviously, the truck needs to be able to do its job, but what differentiates is durability and how much it's going to cost them over a 5-year, a 7-year, whatever their time period is. This led us to develop our step van platform. We sell predominantly as a Class 6. We've had Class 5 variants in the past as well. And it's used, we use multiple upfitters for different body styles, but predominantly you'll see it as a step van for parcel delivery or uniform linen rentals. And then we have a big deployment with Loomis as armored cars. Over the years since that initial launch, and I think the first one was in customer hands in 2018, we've expanded our team and facilities, worked with financing and fleet partners like National Lease, which was recently announced, and have extended into some of these other aspects of the business that support getting more of these trucks on the road. And your charging infrastructure, as well as some of our other products. As I mentioned, we're based in Los Angeles. That's where I live. I live right down by the port in Long Beach, so I am very close to the realities of the trucking industry, as well as the realities of the emissions on our air quality. But we have our headquarters and R&D facility in LA, but then actually manufacture all of our vehicles now in Tennessee, just a few hours south of here on the border, that's where I'm off to next. We've realized that, as an EV company trying to get into commercial trucking, where these are very mature products and established technology, our angle has always been to change the least amount of things to make a very high quality product for our customers. So that's led us to continue drawing from the experienced EV talent pool on the West Coast, but also leverage suppliers, partners, and talent that we've brought in-house from the biggest truck manufacturers out there. we recognize that we don't need to reinvent every part of a truck, and it doesn't need to look different to be successful. So we operate 4 divisions. As I keep mentioning, as a vehicle OEM, that's our main focus. Right now it's the medium duty, predominantly step van configurations. We have 300 or over 300 now on the road. You'll get an update on that figure at the end of next month with our earnings call. Supporting that, though, we have 3 other pieces. The first is Exosphere, which is our software platform, which is really an augmentation to existing fleet management tools that brings in some of the EV-specific metrics. I'll mention that a little bit more on another slide. And then, I mean, I've heard it over and over in this room, both in presentations and conversations along the side. That charging infrastructure piece is challenging. And the biggest single block to adoption of new EVs. And so that's why we have launched Xos Energy Services and really built that out over the past year to provide an end-to-end service for customers to get their charging infrastructure up for Xos fleets, mixed fleets, competitor fleets. We're just trying to get those charge heads out there for the type of customers that we service. And then finally, we have a powertrain business powered by Xos, where we work with other OEMs of off-highway specialty vehicles, there's a Wiggins forklift there, and provide electrification packages, largely for classes of vehicles that just haven't justified or haven't gotten the ground-up EV redesign that these larger volume truck markets are getting. So back to our truck. We're constantly evolving this design and improving it. But here are some of our current specifications. We tend to target and sell to customers that have 1 to 200 mile range needs. And the way we think about range, that's with a representative payload on a representative route for parcel delivery. So this isn't your flatland perfect temperature and 30 miles an hour everywhere. This is, you take a little bit of highway to get there, you do your route, lots and lots of stops, and you come back. And I'll get into more of the details of kind of why this is important for the markets we serve, and what advantages those markets provide to us as an OEM. But I mean, these are vehicles that are running these sort of local routes, and that's why we're pleased to work predominantly with your parcel delivery services, your uniform and linen, some vocational fleets, as well as the armored cars. Loomis was one of our first customers and has just placed another large order with us. So we're always heartened to see like kind of return support from these groups that we've had relationships with for 5-6 years now. In addition, building off of that technology, we are bringing to market a medium duty and heavy duty, so a medium duty chassis cab and a heavy duty tractor, again for these sort of local routes. And it still fits in our thesis of we don't want to reinvent anything that we don't have to. These are all using standard charging ports, available to any upfitter for whatever configuration you might want. I think that from speaking with drivers and working with our customers, the move to EV, the driving experience and the potential savings that are out there and regulatory compliance is what drives this adoption. It's not about needing to reinvent and make, the truck doesn't need to fundamentally change to be a successful product. So a little bit more then about our software. As I mentioned, Exosphere is really an augmentation to existing fleet management tools. But what we realized and why we brought this to market quite quickly was fleet operators, they know how to manage a fleet, but they're not used to thinking about their charging infrastructure, their charging time, the charge rates of their vehicles, as well as a modern design, we have pretty remarkable real-time telematics and ability to do over-the-air updates with our trucks. And so that's integrated into this software that we include with our trucks at a nominal cost. And then one part that I'm very deeply involved with, and I think it's kind of become essential in this industry, and you've heard of some of the other OEMs on the EV side offering similar services, is Xos Energy Services and getting that charging infrastructure up. Where this came from is that even our most excited customers who were bought in on EVs didn't really know how to go about getting chargers installed. They weren't aware. They had heard there might be incentives, but then they would have to work with the utility, but they had never done any of this before. And so we, through offering our own hardware, working with third-party suppliers, we'll walk our customers through looking at their site, planning out their charge heads, all the way through permitting, construction, and installation of those charge heads to get trucks out on the road. And because we are serving these back-to-base last-mile fleets, the customers have that agency over their charging. There's not a dependency on public charging like there is for line haul and in longer uses. And then finally, a little bit on our powertrain business that really has just come out of becoming experts in electric powertrain and the batteries and especially the control software for commercial vehicles. We found a number of OEMs of specialty equipment, industrial machinery even, that have a desire or a need to move to electric powertrains, but for their own volumes and their own internal capabilities, they need support in developing those electrification packages. They're not going to just redesign their entire line right off the bat to move to EV. And so we provide that by leveraging our existing technology and supply chains to electrify their vehicles. Okay, so I've told you now who we are, what we do, but the real meat of this talk and what I wanted to get into is the why. So why are we doing this? We've heard from others, there's lots of different strategies. We know Tesla is pursuing Class 8 long haul, but why have we gone after this market and stay very focused on it with both our step van and upcoming larger vehicles? And it really comes down to three things. There's the range, there's the charging infrastructure piece, and then there's the efficiencies and the ownership advantages that in many cases apply to all commercial EVs. So starting with range, the average step van is driving 30, 50, maybe 80 miles a day and making hundreds of stops. The only time we really see significantly further routes is in rural routes, which tend to have fewer trucks, and that we believe will be a little bit slower to move to full EV adoption. But you can imagine, I mean, I live in a very urban area. I was at my local UPS depot sorting facility 2 nights ago. I was hearing that they have trucks that, especially in the peak season, might do 15 miles and 250 stops. Now that's an extreme end, but you can see how even if we're doing 50 miles, you don't need a massive battery pack beyond the scope of what has already been delivered in vehicles today. With average sort of efficiencies, our drivers are often using the same amount of energy as is in the pack of a commercial or of a passenger EV, your Chevy Bolts, your Ford Mach-E's, a Tesla Model 3. So now we have to have a bigger battery pack than that to have additional margin. But it is not as though we need to focus on squeezing every bit of performance out. And instead, we can go back to what our customers are asking from us and focus on durability and the cost of ownership with our battery designs and with our whole powertrain systems. On the charging side, we have the benefit of these fleets going back to base. So most of these trucks sit for 5 to 16 hours overnight when charging is generally the cheapest at commercial rates. If you recall from our spec sheet, I mean, our charging is, most of the time we're installing level 2 chargers with these that are charging from 4 to 8 hours for a full charge. These trucks are rarely running to be completely empty. They're coming back with 30, 40, 50% left in the battery. So this means that there's no dependency on public infrastructure. There are still challenges in getting that infrastructure installed. That's why we've created a whole division to support customers doing that. But we don't have to wait years or decades for there to be public infrastructure across the country that we can plug into at any time. Now, we build our trucks to be compatible with the vast majority of chargers, use standardized charging plugs so that in an emergency you can, or if you need to for your use case, use public infrastructure, and as it becomes more available, we're sure more customers will do that. But we've targeted this market because customers generally have the agency to solve that infrastructure problem for themselves in a convenient way that doesn't disrupt their workflow from what it is currently. So if we look at a couple examples of what this actually looks like and put some numbers behind it for charging a fleet, I've grabbed a couple of satellite images of some local step van fleet location. So on the left there, we've got a uniform rental location in Indianapolis, and then the closest FedEx ground sorting facility on the right. And both of these would have, I mean, the uniform company have a much smaller fleet, 5, 10, or probably 10, 15, 25 step vans, whereas the FedEx ground facility may very well have 100. But rarely do we see massive fleets parked in remote areas. These are sizable fleets, but they tend to be parked on site at an owned location or a long-term lease location that already has significant power run to it. So while the concerns about what happens when the whole industrial area electrifies are entirely valid and will be a thing that we'll all have to solve over the coming years, these local delivery fleets tend to be on site in places where that power can at least be run. It is not having to build an entirely new substation. It's not having to run high voltage to an area for the first time, as we sometimes have seen with the Class 2, 3 fleets that are parked in an empty lot somewhere, and Class 8 long haul, which, I mean, as we all know, can be anywhere. I came from an agriculture background where sometimes for heavy processing machinery, if we were trying to set up in a new lot, you'd be pulling in 1,000-volt services. Whereas here we're able to support an average size fleet with your sort of standard commercial electrical services. As batteries get bigger, as vehicles get bigger, as you go up in the classes and up in range, those demands get higher if you want to maintain these sort of fast overnight or faster than that charging times. And then if we bring it to the total cost of ownership. So we see benefits here that are across the board with EVs, but I'll speak to our experience with our customers, where you're saving from the inherent efficiency improvement of an electric powertrain. You're avoiding some of the volatility in your fuel costs. You have the lower maintenance spend, and then I'll touch on at the end, there are some very significant incentives that are motivating acquisition of these vehicles, not at some point, but today and this year. So the points I wanted to make on you guys can read all the numbers here, but the points I wanted to make on the efficiency and the fuels, the energy cost, is we walk our customers through it all the time of how much they're going to save based on their route and the efficiency of their current trucks and how much they're in stop and go and how our vehicles with regenerative braking can improve that. But one of the things that kind of gets missed a lot of the time when you look at these average figures for fuel costs is just the volatility in there compared with the volatility in your electric rates. So those electric rates are much more stable and very much less susceptible to geopolitical concerns and global commodity markets than the diesel fuel that people are switching away from. So there is a value that can be placed on that predictability above and beyond just the pure cost savings. Because when we have a fuel price spike and diesel is $7 a gallon in California, our EV customers they're not feeling that. Their electric rates, especially when they're charging in the middle of the night, are not changing dramatically. And then we have some preliminary data coming out. This 40% figure is from a government study of the government-owned fleets on the light-duty side, which obviously are more mature, and there's just more of them out there for a better end. But the maintenance costs for these vehicles tend to be dramatically lower simply because you have pulled out a lot of high-maintenance systems. You don't have an engine or a transmission or a fuel system or emissions after treatments to worry about. There are new systems that are different and that require significant retraining and new technical staff to maintain. But overall, you are ending up with a simpler vehicle, which on its own provides savings to our customers, but it also can help support higher uptime and, again, more predictability in the same way as avoiding those fluctuations in fuel costs, which, especially when it's those crunch times around Christmas for our parcel delivery customers and fleets, they value that they're less likely to have a truck go out. They're not going to have to spend as much on rentals. I think the whole industry is still maturing on this. I think there's still plenty of room for EVs to get better on the reliability front and deliver more on that promise of durability that I made up front. But there's there's room for a very big advantage for our customers here, especially in these stop and go sort of usages where there's often a lot of time spent idling. I think our armored truck customers often report that their vehicles spend 50% of their time on the road idling, which causes increased wear on the diesel engines and is now facing regulatory constraints with anti-idling laws. And our electric vehicles, as you're aware, I mean, there's always the challenges with weather conditions, but they excel in that stop and go environment and they don't waste additional energy while pulling up and pulling away from each stop in the same way that an idling diesel will. And then finally, I think this is one of the things that is making this the most relevant for right now, is the incredible spend on incentives and upcoming spend on incentives for these sort of vehicles. So these figures are relevant to Xos's trucks, so your Class 6 commercial vehicles. But on the federal side, and we've all heard about the Inflation Reduction Act, and it's providing up to $40,000 tax credit per commercial EV purchased without any caps yet put in place on how many vehicles an individual fleet operator can qualify for. And that is stackable with these state-level incentives that I've only shown a selection here. And I'm happy to talk more about these around the floor later if anybody's interested about some of the longer list there. But in California, where we sell a good number of our vehicles, each one of our step vans qualifies for an $85,000 voucher. So California is taking that off of the cost that you were paying upfront for this vehicle. So that's an $85,000 voucher plus a $40,000 tax credit on a vehicle that'll be $150,000 to $180,000 depending on the configuration. I mean, that not only helps, that doesn't just close gaps for TCO for consumers who already have very efficient diesel fleets or their routes are very well suited for ICE vehicles, it often swings the favor massively towards electric and helps get people over that one-time investment in getting their charging infrastructure up and running. So I think it will be an important part for all of us to see how these things play out, who's taking advantage of them, which states are able to follow on. But there's definitely a sense among customers that they want to be able to take advantage of this. They think that it won't last forever, which I think we all intuitively know. And that is kind of getting our sales over the line for these smaller vehicles that they know that they can already use. I mean, there are, for Class 7, Class 8, there are larger incentives available, but the technology just doesn't exist to fulfill the majority of operators' needs. And so we're seeing that traction where, a parcel delivery company will say, we want your Class 8 tractor one day, but we know that we can actually use your step vans every day for all of our routes. So let's go with that today and get our hands on some of this incentive money before it changes or dries up. So with that, I hope I've given you a bit of an understanding on Xos, but also our perspective and why we prioritize this short haul, last mile, back to base fleets when a number of other firms are pushing more of the boundaries on range. We think that it's most valuable to deliver a technology that works today and products that fulfill everyone's needs, and that the technology will evolve and we will naturally see some of these advancements and applicability beyond the shortest routes and into your long haul. With that, I have a short video here that I'm hoping we can bring up, and then we'll take some questions.